Jesus is not coming, K-Gabby. He's not coming. He ain't finna save you. Let me tell you something. If you was a slave owner, would you give your slaves anything to empower them, to help them out, to free them? If you was a slave owner, if that was a remote possibility that Jesus could have freed you, the white man would have never even had the idea of giving Jesus to you. Jesus can't free you, man. You got to free yourself. And the average black person is afraid to try to free themselves. The average black person don't even want to fathom the thought of existing without the white man, because at this point it's a symbiotic relationship. We need them and they need us.
And that's far from the case. All right. We don't need the so-called white man. All right. We don't need his validation. I'm going to start off with that in Isaiah 10. Isaiah chapter 10. In verse 20. And it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, you see, because it's only about a small select few, all right, a remnant, the elect, that's going to, the Lord is going to put the Spirit on to draw them away from the, basically the spiritual shackles. All right, here it is. Jake is trying to hold on to these spiritual shackles. All right, because they don't want to let the so-called white man go. They love being servants to the servants. All right, they love being in servitude. They love massa. All right, the ultimate case of Stockholm syndrome. All right, and that's why they're just going to have to go down with the so-called white man at the end of the day. All right, and that's why, again, it's only about a remnant. It's only about the elect that's going to be saved. All right, in that day, or excuse me, reading on, it says, and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob shall no more again stay upon him that smote them, but shall stay upon Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel. In truth, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty power. All right, so you see, it's only about the remnant at the end of the day, the elect at the end of the day, because Jake loves being in servitude to the so-called white man. I'm going to grab another one here in Isaiah 51 in verse 23. But I will put it into the hand of them that afflict thee, which have said to thy soul, bow down, that we may go over. And thou hast laid thy body as the ground, and as the street to them that went over. So you see, Jake loves to bend over backwards for the so-called white man, to the point where, like old boy was saying, Jake, they can't fathom the idea of anything without the so-called white man being in the picture, because Jake has been beat down so much. All right. I want to give all praises to Yahawashai. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom to you, hopeful elect. I'm your brother Yahweh Call from Great Millstone, Orlando. And of course, fair use, copyright disclaimer. I'm not making any type of monetary gain off this clip. This is just for informational purposes. All right. And again, as old boy said, Jesus ain't coming. All right. And I always make the point. I'm going to continue to make the point. Jesus being an idol. All right. A man that's on the earth right now that everyone worships as an idol. All right. When Yahawashi comes, which Yahweh is the true name of who the world ignorantly calls God, and all things are done in the name of his only begotten Son, who the world, they foolishly call Jesus. His true name is Yahawashi. And again, when Yahawashi returns, when Yahweh sends Yahawashi, this character, this individual that everyone is worshiping as the Messiah, he's going into slavery. He's going to be a part of the first batch of slavery. All right, the first fruits of slavery. All right. All right, man. So, again, with that being said, Jesus is not coming to save everyone. He's not coming to save anyone. Hell, he can't even save himself, contrary to popular belief. All right. And, again, old boy made some valid points, just dealing with the fact that why would the so-called white man give you something to or put it like this? When is he giving you When is he giving so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native American Indians anything that's beneficial for them? Because Christianity, Jesus hasn't done anything for a Negro, but keep us dumbed down, docile. All right, keep us in slavery to the point where, hey man, all praise to you, how about Shema Shai? The Lord really allowed this devil to get us, really get one on us, man. Which goes to show you the true power of Yahweh Shema Shai, because the Lord said He raised the bases of men and sets set them on high. Here it is, Esau. He's come a long way through the power of Yahweh Shema Shai, from grunting, right, like dogs, like animals, like pure beasts, to now he's wearing three-piece suits. And now he's ruling over us. All right. He's ruling over the saints. That's the power of the Lord right there. So again, the Lord, man, he really allowed this devil to get one over us, man. But hey, with that being said, because like it tells you in Deuteronomy how, the Lord, we would have to go to our enemy in need of one of all things. All right. Pretty much that's what Stockholm Syndrome is, man. It's just basically you develop a feeling, so to say, an attachment to the slave owner. All right, your captor. All right. Oftentimes it's due to the goodies, the benefits, whatever the case may be. That's why I would say we have Stockholm Syndrome in righteousness to Yahweh Shema Shai. But Jake, they can't let go of this Jesus juice. And that's what's called about it, because here it is, we're trying to tell our people that I'm trying to let our people know that the gospel, the good news, the gospel, the good news. Again, we are the people of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, we are the people of the Lord. And this is not the end all be all. All right, this is not the final destination. This is what we're trying to tell our people. But again, like old boy was saying, Jake has been beat down so much to where they can't fathom anything without the so-called white man being involved in it. Which again, it just goes to show you how lost Jake is, man. How far gone Jake is, to the point where, as I read in Isaiah 51, they love to bend over backwards for the so-called white man. They love being servants to these servants. All right. You see, here it is. We're supposed to have a ruling class mentality, but, things like that. Hey, Jake will look at you as an enemy, for speaking truth, And again, call Haloyim Yahweh Bashimon Shai for giving us this truth. Because how do we set ourselves free? Well, for one, we don't set ourselves free. All right. The spiritual shackles have been let loose. When we're called into this truth, you see, the Lord has to tap us on the head, man, and call us into this truth. You see, matter of fact, because this is a topic right now. You got certain jakes out here breaking this down wrong. So I'm gonna grab this real quick. In 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter 3. I'm going to start at 18. For Hamashiach also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to the most high power, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. And again, we are revived. We are brought back to life when we are called into this truth. Because without this wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, we are spiritually dead. All right. We were in the congregation of the dead at one point, And that's why, like Yahweh Shai said, let the dead bury the dead. How can the dead bury their dead? How can the dead bury the dead? You see, showing you that it's a spiritual death. Jacob is spiritually dead. Hell, again, we were spiritually dead at one point. All right, but when we're called into this truth, we are revived. We are brought back to life. All right. It says, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of the Most High waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was up preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Because again, at that time, during the time pre-flood, it was just Noah and those 8 souls, which those were the elect at that time. All right. And nevertheless, it was a small number. So like I read earlier, it's all about the elect, that remnant, which is still a small number, compared to the world in general, but specifically when it comes to the nation of Israel. That's why a lot of Israelites are going to die, because again, they can't let go of this Jesus juice. They can't let go of the so-called white man. They can't fathom an environment without the so-called white man. All right. But nevertheless, the point being in verse 19, it says, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison. So you see, because the spiritual those spiritual shackles have been let loose. This isn't talking about Yahushua going into a literal place called hell where people are burning. All right. And, Yahushua was preaching to souls and spirits in hell. No, man. For one, spirits can't perish. Spirits can't be destroyed. They can only be transferred, so because the whole concept of hell, when you, it could be broken down 1,000,001 ways, but when you look at it, when you look at it logically, when you just think about it logically, it doesn't make sense. How are spirits, how is energy, how can you burn energy, how can energy be perished? But that's one of the strongholds, that this truth has exposed through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right. That's a stronghold, it's a fear tactic taught mainly by the Catholic Church, because all of these different religions, man, for the most part, they're just a stem of the Catholic Church, which is one of the 3 unclean beasts, basically going into the religion sector. All right. Basically this is a way of scaring people to get more money, You got even certain Israelite groups that teach the whole hell doctrine. All right. But nevertheless, this prison, again, as the scriptures talk about how, we are gods, but we die like mortal men. All right. Mere mortals. All right. We are the spirits trapped in these chains of darkness, which is in this flesh. All right. So again, with that being said, like the scriptures talk about the prisoners being let loose. All right. The prisoners being set free. Now, ultimately, we're waiting on Yahushua to come in and redeem, physically gather us. But spiritually speaking, like I said, the spiritual shackles have been let loose. All right. St. John 8:32. All right. Let me grab that real quick so I don't misquote it. In St. John 8:32, it says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. You see, and Jake, they love to be, they want to stay spiritually shackled, man. They want to stay spiritually shackled. They love the so-called white man. And again, like old boy said, why would the so-called white man give you anything that's beneficial for you? When has he ever given anything that's beneficial for Jake? So Jesus ain't coming back to save no one. In fact, Jesus is going into slavery. All right. When Yahushua comes. All right. And all those that join hand in hand with the enemy, you're going to perish with them. You're going to fall with the enemy. All right. But again, man, here it is, trying to let our people know the gospel, the good news. Again, this is not the end all be all. Waking up, working these bullshit 9-to-5 jobs. All right. Not like to sound like, not to sound like this nigga, I am somebody, but, again, here to let you people know through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai that you are somebody, man. Esau says that we're what? 3/5 of the man, 3/4 of the man, whatever the case may be. But no, man, he's the one that's, a pile of shit has more value than a so-called white man. A pile of shit has more value than a so-called white man. All right. Again, trying to let you boneheaded Negroes need to grow, all right, need to grow up, so-called Hispanics and Indians, man, that, hey, you come from royalty, man, all right, you're a nation of kings and priests, and you women as well, you're the princesses or the daughters of Israel, man. Come back to your lineage, come back to who you are. This is the gospel, the good news. All these nations are supposed to be in servitude to you, but again, when it comes to Jake, they've been beat down so much they can't see an environment without the so-called white man. Jacob died about the so-called white man. Jacob be in agreement with everything according to the scriptures, but when it comes to the so-called white man, oh man, Jacob fight for the so-called white man. He'll kill for the so-called white man. All right, you know that's why Jake has to get put down like dogs, man, useless dogs. Because again, we're trying to let our people know, hey, kings and priests, man, right? A ruling class mentality, but they just can't see it. They can't see it with that so-called white man. All right. They're still in the congregation of the dead, and it's not until they die on this side and when they come back and born through the loins of the elect, that's when they'll get it. But I mean, as of right now, man, Jake, they're useless, They're useless. The scriptures talk about how the Lord planted, that beautiful vineyard, but it brought forth wild grapes. What do you do with wild grapes? You cast them to the fire. They're useless. That's what Jake is. 2/3, they're useless, man. So they can't see an environment without the so-called white man. Versus again the elect, the remnants. Now, of course, it's all spiritual right now, and that's why, again, we're waiting on the Lord to physically get us up out of this place. But we don't need a so-called white man's validation. All right, we don't need his validation. Like I quoted earlier, hey, yeah, we would go to them for the need and want of all things. All right, but hey, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, this was just to teach the sons of God a lesson. The teach the heirs a lesson. But Jake got to get out of this. It's Stockholm syndrome, the ultimate case of Stockholm syndrome. Jake is too institutionalized, man, and they're not gonna get it. They're not gonna wake up. Here it is. We're in 2025, man. It's like, goddamn, Christianity's losing. Christianity's through. But I'm gonna grab this in 2 Edges 14. Second 14. Second 14 and 14. Let go from the mortal thoughts and cast away the burdens of man. Put off now the weak nature. And set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee. And haste to flee from these times. Because you see, that whole attitude of basically, like I said in verse 14, this whole attitude, and that's why we have to be born again. That's why we have to, spiritually speaking, of course, we have to be born again. All right. We have to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, because prior to the truth, we were taught to think contrary to Yahawashai. And where did that come from? Esau, the so-called white man. And that's why, again, Jake, they can't let they can't get off that Jesus juice. They can't get off that Jesus wine. They can't let it. They can't let it go. They can't put that bottle down. They can't put that GMO down. Here it is, the Lord, like the scriptures talk about, that table being prepared in the midst of our enemies, right? Proverbs 9 talks about that table, of all good things, roughly paraphrasing, straight organic, non-GMO. But Jake, man, they hey, they love that GMO shit. Versus those of us over here, hey, eating good, non-GMO, nothing GMO, everything organic. Jake just can't put the pork down, man. They can't put them GMOs down, man. They can't put the McDonald's down. They just love Jesus. They love massa. They love the so-called white man. And that's why they have such a problem with the truth, because, hey, tearing down the strongholds. It's a reprover of thoughts. You see, tearing down your vain imagination. You see, that's why there's this push against the truth. Push against the truth. You see, and again, 2/3, hey, they'll die about the so-called white man, and that's exactly going to be the case for them. They're gonna have to die. They're gonna have to die with him. They're gonna have to go down with him. Jesus ain't coming to save no one. He can't even save himself. That's why Jake gotta go, man. Sleeping with the top enemy. Siding with the top enemy, because that's what it boils down to at the end of the day. All bets in on Yahawashi, or all bets in on Esau Edom, man. And 2/3, they're already given over. Really that the MOTB is really the cherry on top. That MOTB is going to be the sealing of the deal. But like Yahushua told those wicked jakes, man, hey, you're all of your father the devil, right? Because they had the spirit. Well, let me get this real quick. In St. John 6:66, it says, "From that time, many of the disciples went back and walked no more with him." So you see, basically, that spirit of the 666, the spirit of the beast, man. The spirit of Esau. All right, and this is the spirit that Jake comes in. They're just not gonna get it, and this is why we're not in it all. Israel being saved spirit, trying to save all Israelites. Israelites, they don't want to be saved. So the hell with them. All right, the hell with them, man. It's only about the elect at the end of the day. And that's who the Lord's dealing with. That's who the Lord is calling home. All right, we don't need the so-called white man's validation for shit. All right, we are not equal to any of these nations, contrary to what we were taught and what we believed at one point. All right. And Jesus ain't coming to save no one. Like old boy said, think, Jake. When has the so-called white man given you anything that's beneficial for you? And that would include, the white Jesus. You got to think, Jake. But hopefully this was edifying. All praises to Yahweh Shai. Shalom to you, hopefully, let.